Arda Ocal with ESPN. Happy to be joined by Mr. WrestleMania himself, the Heartbreak Kid, Shawn Michaels. We couldn't do WrestleMania lookbacks, reminisce about WrestleMania without talking with HBK himself. He also is an executive with NXT, helping groom the next generation of talent that you see on WWE television. Shawn, thank you so much for joining us.
I appreciate y'all having me.
So you have a lot of WrestleMania matches to talk about. I actually would love to talk about one of the first ones. We'll start with one of the first ones that really was like the first WrestleMania moment for Shawn Michaels. That was Madison Square Garden, WrestleMania 10, and a match that many WWE fans had never seen before up until that point, a ladder match. There's one particular point in the match that I'd like to start with, Shawn, and that is, here you are, you're climbing the ladder, and it feels like a WrestleMania moment is about to happen. And then, all of a sudden, there it is. Shawn Michaels, bare bottom.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, look, so that's one of those ones that it's a freebie. Like you got, I mean, that's one that it's tailor-made. It's perfect for the moment. You got to have that. It's a chance to moon the world, and believe it or not, and that was even before I even had the ability to even, think that there was going to be a time in the future where any of this stuff would become a moment or something that people would remember for many, many years. And so really it was something where in many times in matches or in live events where you just, wrestling on the road, 250 days a year, there's a sunset flip and oh my goodness. And then the guy pulls your pants down for a second and like, oh my goodness. And then you go back into the sunset flip. And of course, how can we add that in a ladder match? And of course, climbing up, and it's pretty simple. It's just, again, depending on who you're out there with is the degree at which they pull them down and how much. And of course, being out there with a very good friend of mine, Scott Hall, he obviously took it upon himself to go ahead and, and there's not much, not much you can do about it when you're climbing up and he takes them halfway to the back of your knees. You're not, there's not much you can do, but it's something that made an impression, obviously. So you're certified to get yourself in some form of video eventually if you do something like that.
The grandest pull of the trunks on the grandest stage of them all, I guess, is a good way to bookend that. But of course, I'm talking about the jump off the ladder, and that's a highlight that gets replayed. It will be replayed forever, right? Like that is really one of the major WrestleMania moments that people point to. And I'm just wondering, like, even just putting that match together or going into that match and how unique it was, like, take me into crescendo to that moment. Like, how much were you thinking about, wow, you know what? It's a ladder match. I got to jump off this ladder. And that's going to be a moment that's going to stand the test of time.
Well, so as I told you a second ago, we didn't have any concept of that at the time. It was WrestleMania. Scott and I had a lot of ladder matches. And so this was all stuff that we had done. It was perfectly natural. It was normal. I don't know. We didn't know that we were doing something innovative or different. He and I had been in these ladder matches a bit. We really didn't know. There was no talk at the time of, let's do one of these at WrestleMania. The WrestleManias and this match, things like that weren't put in place quite as in advance as they are now. And so we were doing them in live events, and it was something Pat Patterson said, boy, it's been going really well. Why don't we put it on at Mania? And we did, but Scott and I really didn't have that much time to chat about it, but we'd had so many, we knew what we were doing. I jumped off that thing a bunch of times. I jumped off anything at that time in my life anyway. So it was really just a lot of fun. We look back on it now. We only had one ladder. There were no backup ladders. If the ladder broke or something happened to it, we have no idea what we would have done. Nowadays, there's always backups, there's spares, there's something to fall back on. But back then, we were just flying footloose and fancy free, so to speak. So that was really just Scott and I going out there and, working with each other the way we had so many times, before, whether with the ladder or without. Scott and I had been in the ring with each other so much that we knew each other backwards and forward. If somebody was moving a certain way, we knew what was coming and where they were going. And again, we didn't, I guess ignorance is bliss in this case. We didn't know at that time the enormity that match would have on future generations.
Let's talk about WrestleMania 14. So I did an interview with you, I want to say like 10 years ago. And we talked about that match and how at the time you felt like that was the toughest day at the office for you. You were physically in pain, mentally you weren't in the right place. This was going to be your last match for a while, and who knows if you would return, etc. And I specifically remember in that match, Shawn, you climbing to the top ropes multiple times in that match and how in pain you looked. Like, I was sold. If you were selling that, I was sold 100%. But I genuinely felt like it was an arduous journey for you to even climb the ropes, to like jump off the ropes for an elbow drop or whatever it was. When you look back on it now, and now I'm asking you the same question 10 years later, when you look back on it, is WrestleMania 14 still one of or the toughest day in the office for you?
So it is. And, hand to God, I was talking to Tyler Breeze about this last night. He came up to me and he mentioned that. And he said, Shawn, he said, it's a match that I show the guys that I train about what real pain looks like. He said, we always talk about selling and way it should look. He said, you were in real pain that night. And I always use that as a reference point to people of what to what it should look like. If you can do it without being in as much physical pain as I was in. And we were talking about that. And the thing that I remember the most, again, so you're in pain, but the thing is, I could think about anytime I thought about something, my body would react. That night it wouldn't react, and it wouldn't fire off like it usually did. And everything was more laborious, more laboring. My upside down on the turnbuckle, I couldn't take that with the same glide, and I just went whap, and so it's a combination of pain and real anger that I was unable to perform in a way that I wanted to. And it wasn't honestly until talking to Tyler last night that he helped me see that in a different light, in that it does have an educational value to it. Because from a performance standpoint, I was just not anywhere near what I wanted to be. And that's always sort of been I don't have a lot of regrets, honestly. But I would have really loved to have been, in top form for Steve that night, and I wasn't. But I'm very thankful that some good has come from that, and so, I will look back and I say that I shouldn't have been out there, obviously, but that was just what I love about this job. I've always given it everything. And even though I wasn't at a great place then, that's what I did there. And all these years later, for it to at least have a different kind of appreciation from people than my other performances, I've learned to see the good in that, I guess, there's, for such a miserable night, some really good stuff came about from that. And so I focus on that.
Shifting focus now, I want to talk about WrestleMania 24 against Ric Flair. This is another, you've had a lot of WrestleMania moments and you've had a lot of highlights that will be played for years to come. And this one might be the most played of all of them, actually. The "I'm sorry, I love you" super kick to end the match. And at that time, Ric Flair's career. I would love to hear the backstory of that particular moment. Was it spur of the moment? Was it something that was planned? How long had you been thinking about it? Like, take me into and dissect "I'm sorry, I love you" in that moment.
Well, for me, that was my love letter to wrestling, and to the Nate, to Ric Flair. So it was, and I feel bad because I feel like I've told this story a bunch, but it is, it's an important one to me. I was driving back to our ranch, and my buddy uh, that I went to high school with, that used to, go to wrestling with me, my buddy Kenny, and he called me and he's like, "Gosh, can you believe it?" And I said, "What?" He goes, "Dude, you're wrestling Ric Flair at WrestleMania." Um, and I said, "Yeah, no," and he goes, "But gosh, Sean, would you have ever thought? I mean, we used to sit there watching him on Saturday, WTBS with Gordon Soley, and he said, now you're wrestling him at WrestleMania, and at this time, Rick's my friend, and this is my job, and I've been doing it for quite some time. But he took me back um, to the 15-year-old kid, and it was over the next several days and weeks that I thought about that, and then one night again, honestly, I woke up at like at 2 o'clock in the morning, and all of a sudden this idea for this match came to me, and I just started writing it down, and by the end I got to it. There were tears on the paper, and I was like, oh my god. It's like I was sitting there thinking to myself, either this is going to be wonderfully emotional, or everyone's going to go like, oh my goodness, what a wuss. um but so that concept came to me just sort of out of the blue, and we got to Mania, and I sort of gave this idea to Rick and to Michael Hayes, and they both looked at it, and Rick got very emotional, and he just patted my leg and he said, "Thank you." And I thought, like, okay, does that mean you guys like it? And they said, well, look, it's all on how it can either, again, they said the same thing, like it can be either really good or just really cheesy. Um, and I said, well, you have to understand, and again, and I've told Rick this a number of times, but you know, getting real with him and saying, you don't understand, look, we're friends now and we're peers and everything else, but you were my guy. You were my guy, and this is the stuff I wanted to do. I said, and I want to convey that story out there. And long story short, I guess it was me, throwing off any performance and any act and any of that. I'm very romantic about this job. That's why I work here where I am with this young talent, because they understand, I've had two loves in my life. It's this and the woman that I'm married to now. And it's just the way that it's always been. And Rick was such a huge part of that. And I wanted this match to reflect that. And I wanted to take everybody back to, when they first fell in love with this stuff, before anybody, I don't know, before he got so cynical about it, or would they do this or would they do that, or does this make sense or does that make sense? Like, I don't know. I just watched it as a fan, and I wanted them to watch this as that 15-year-old kid that I used to watch it as. And to me, I still do. I think that's the one thing, is that I'm 55 now, been in this business for 35 years. And I think that's why they enjoy having me around here, because I still get up and get excited, and I'm bouncing around the seat, and I'm, pulling Hunter like, oh my goodness, I'm still a wrestling fan. And so that's what I was trying to connect with that night. And my, my real love and passion for it. And, I think we did. I get it. I think it's one of the times where even the, the toughest dude in the room, everybody remembers that. Everybody got emotional. And that's all I wanted to do, is for a moment, set aside all the cynicism and all the whatever, good guy, bad guy, good, bad of the real life of this business, and get into the reason I think we all started watching it in the first place.
Yeah, one of the reasons that many people watch is storytelling, and that brings me to the next WrestleMania, where many people believe that this was they will call it one of the greatest matches ever. Some have even said it's the perfect match, and I know that's difficult to say, especially for someone who's been in the business for 30 years. But a lot of people say that this is their favorite match or the best match of all time. Shawn Michaels versus The Undertaker, WrestleMania 25. I'd love to hear from your point of view how you view this match today.
Well, look, it was. To me, all I know is it's the one that I left, that I felt like I could leave it all behind and I'd be okay with it. And that's all I can say. I never felt peace after a match like I did in that one. And that's why I made the decision that I made. Because I don't, it just felt really nice. And it felt like I had done or accomplished whatever the goal was. And again, I got into this not, I mean, I've been so fortunate I had to dream bigger than, uh, than I had because I'd been so fortunate to go where I went in this line of work. And and once you do that, then it's just this world of unknown. And when is that last one? When does that happen? And over the years, I've seen people struggle with it, and certainly that day only gets closer the longer you do it. And even though I wasn't, I don't know, it's not like I was looking to find the one to end it on. It just felt that way. And as I told my wife on the way home, I said, look, if that's the last one, I said, I think I'm okay with that. And she's like, really? And I said, yeah. And she said, all right. And but because from her standpoint, and even when I retired, she figured it was only, I don't know, be a week or two. And to this day, she's still stunned that I walked away when I walked away, and have been, and she, get it, because poor girl's got to live with me every day. Has never seen it bother me one bit. Again, it was just a feeling of such complete and total peace and rest with what I'd done that I just figured you're crazy if you try to mess with that, And so I knew that the next one was, the one to end it on, and that was that. And like I said, I feel like it was a really good decision because, again, I've never, no, I don't know, none of it's ever bothered me since.
I even love the entrances of that match. You ascending from the heavens and the Undertaker from the depths of hell with the fire, everything is such a nice contrast. Like, take me into the creative of that. Like, how did that come about?
Well, so I have to give Michael Hayes credit for that. That was something. Obviously, Michael knows the transformation in my real life. He was just, because it was against the Undertaker, because it was Mr. WrestleMania against the Dead Man and the Streak. He felt there was a way we could tie in a little bit of that real life aspect of me, and just the contrast, as you said, of the two coming together. He told Taker and I that he first presented it to Vince. He's like, "Oh God, no, no, Michael, you can't. I mean, heaven and hell. That's Jesus, it's too religious. It's this, that, and the other." And Michael's just like, "No, we're not. It's not. We're not trying to go into his faith or anything. It's just symbolic, And like, oh my goodness, I don't know about that." And then the more we went into our story, the more I think it began to make sense. And then, of course, he felt like, oh my goodness, it's perfect. That's it. We wouldn't do it any other way. And I was like, okay, like, we're glad you like it, because again, we really feel like it works. So, but it is, and that's another reason again why I think some of that completion was there when it was all over with, because it was, as you say, it wasn't just the fundamentals of the match. I mean, let's face it, it's not like Taker I can do anything cooler move wise than anybody else that night. It was just the combination, the story, the psychology in which we went about it, these two characters that have been sort of these very opposite and polarizing pillars of this brand for so long, but their growth and their maturation, so to speak, and then to have come to this point where they're the last two, and they're very different from where they started, but equally, I don't know, equally cool in their own respect, so to speak. And as I say, it would just, I don't know, when you have that many good things coming together, I don't know, those are the ones that you got to go, like, like end on a high note, and, you tell the best joke of the night, and even if you weren't planning on ending, that's when you leave the stage, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Couple more questions for you. I'm curious, fans versus even NXT superstars. From a fan perspective versus an NXT superstar, or even a wrestler perspective, what matches at WrestleMania are you asked about the most?
So the ladder match always comes up. obviously. And look, honestly, the ones you mentioned, the ladder match, the match with Rick now, and the match with Taker. Those are the ones that I think, from a WrestleMania standpoint, come out the most. Very quickly behind is 12 with Bret. He texted me yesterday. He said, "Look, it's the anniversary," and I thought to myself, because yesterday's my wedding anniversary. I thought it's like, holy cow, Brett remembered my wedding anniversary. It's like, it's the 25th anniversary of of our marathon match. And I was like, oh my goodness, is it? And so, but that's another one again. And that one was, again, as I told him, there isn't anybody else I could have done that with, I mean, to go an hour, I could have done that with anybody but Brett. And look, and that's the thing. All these years later, both he and I were, from a fan perspective, I think they get caught up in so much of the personal rivalry that he and I are so far removed from that now that, I don't know. Again, you think about the first time going an hour on a pay-per-view, what a risk that was. And you just how, again, out of the box, I think that was. And again, I look back on my career and having the opportunity to have done a lot of those kinds of things over the years has been what's been most special to me, is being a part of some of the really big moments in WWE history, whether it's WrestleMania or, whatever, ladder matches, cell matches, whatever, marathon matches, to be the guy that the company sort of trusted to be the guinea pig to, like, let's, I don't know, let's try this new idea. Well, let Shawn try it. Shawn will do anything, and if he survives it, maybe we'll go with it. So again, those are the things that are so very important to me. My match with Kevin, again, being out there with your friends. So there are a number of different matches that are special to me in different ways. Again, just being out there, our first time, at WrestleMania 5, and I know it's with the Twin Towers and we got beat and everything else, but your first one, it's a big deal. And
did it feel like WrestleMania at that time, like WrestleMania 5? Like, was it an important thing for, because like wrestlers today, they only know a world with WrestleMania in it, but you knew a world without WrestleMania in it, right? So like, did it feel like that was a career milestone?
Yeah, for sure. Because so at first you get here, so you're a guy working all these other places. So first it's just, we used to call it just getting to New York, getting to the WWE. So then you get there, but then heck, of our first pay-per-view, holy cow, we're on a pay-per-view. And then it becomes, dude, if you can get on WrestleMania, that's it. So yeah, it was definitely, it was big. And that's what, again, I go back again, first one with Tito, it's like, oh my goodness, and it's in a stadium, and you walk out the first time with all those people, and I don't care what number you are, you just never envisioned a time. When I started watching wrestling, gosh, they were in small little rooms, and then you start seeing these other shows where these places are full, and you imagine yourself, oh my goodness, what it must be like to walk into a stadium. And again, you get to do that for the first time. It is. That's what and again, that's why I'm 55. That stuff is still never lost its specialness to me. And I don't know, again, everybody, oh, were you nervous? Yeah, every time. I petrified every time. I mean, no, you don't show it. But at the same time, WrestleMania, even, but especially WrestleMania, I mean, it was 48, 72 hours before that. I started to hone in. My family would be there, but they knew I wasn't there. At the Hall of Fame, I'm there doing everything like this, but my mind is on tomorrow and everything that we're going to do. And I did anyway, I get into this very focused place of this, that was my end all be all. And it was, WrestleMania was my time to let the world know that, again, there's all these guys, there's championships, there's this, there's that, there's all these special matches. And then there's this dude that does something every year that you will remember. And that's what I just wanted to carve out for myself, because you're not always going to be the champion. You're not always going to be this. You're not always going to be that. Everything is ever changing. But the one thing I could guarantee is that I could perform, in a way that hopefully there would be something that would they would remember. And after a while, unlike WrestleMania 10, where I don't have the ability or the maturity to understand that there are moments that will change people's lives or that they'll remember forever. You fast forward to, to 15, 20 years later, I now know that. And I now know that now I want to create these moments that people go like, I know when you did this. And I was at this place where I was this age when you said this or did that. And I don't know. That's when it becomes neat. It really is, because it's one thing to want to be a wrestler, and then it's another thing to where you begin to grasp that you've been a part of people's lives for a really long time, and you go like, "Wow, that's pretty neat." Because I when I was 12, that was not how I pictured this.
And you're now going to be part of WWE superstars' careers for a long time, whether you inspired them when they were young or now coaching them to get to WWE, to get to WrestleMania. So here's my last question for you. And I find it fascinating that you said, I was always nervous for WrestleMania. The nerves were always there. So how do the nerves compare when you were competing at WrestleMania versus when you have coached a talent for a long time and now they're getting this opportunity? Maybe they're in the main event of WrestleMania, or they're finally getting their WrestleMania match. Like, how do those nerves compare? How does that preparation compare for you as the performer versus the coach?
Yeah, well, so that's like, now it's worse because because it's like your kids, right? Like, you're less nervous about driving and stuff like that, and now they're starting to drive, and you're like, oh my good, and so you want it to go perfectly for them. You know the time and the preparation, and they have the ability and the talent to make it happen, but you have none of you can't get your hands on it. They're out there doing it now, and it's very anxious for me, which is why I'm so active in the back, so to speak. I mean, they make fun of me all the time because I'm, moving around and jumping and stuff like that, because it is. I want it to go well for them, because I know the feeling that they're going to have when they come back and they've knocked it out of the park. And I want them to have that. That's the single best thing about this job, is especially when you've got a group of us, 100, we're very close here. And we're close with our talent. And I think they do. I think they understand how important it is to us that it goes well for them, because we enjoy this now more for them than we ever enjoyed it for ourselves. This is so much better, again, because it's like your children, accomplishing things. It's just such a better, greater feeling. And you want it for them. And the anxiousness is waiting for that to happen, And so, look, it's phenomenal. And that's why, but that's why I'm here doing it all the time, because I got, you got to have it, in one form or another. Yeah. So, not the adrenaline junkie from the performance standpoint anymore, but I want it for the talent, because I want them to enjoy that feeling, because I know what it's like, and I know how it makes them feel. I know how it builds their confidence, and how it shapes them in their careers. And it's plus, when you like them personally, you want the best for them.
WrestleMania 37, April 10th and 11th on Peacock. Shawn Michaels joining us for some fun WrestleMania memories here on ESPN. Shawn, thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thank you guys for putting up with me and listen to me ramble on.